Greetings and welcome, readers and friends. I'm so happy that you're here joining us today. Welcome to A Chat With. I'm Jennifer Willcock, and I am a fantasy young adult writer, and I write contemporary young adult as well. And on Sunday, December the 10th, my novel, Weight of the Crown, is being released, and it is the sequel to my retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, Into the Forest. And I thought, what a great way to celebrate and talk to my editor, Sara Davison.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Sara. Welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to tell you a few things about Sara. She is a friend first and foremost, and is part of a writing group that she actually founded. And I find her knowledge of novels, writing, publishing, editing to be very valuable. And she's been a huge help and inspiration to me. And she has edited all 5 of my fiction books. And she's also an award-winning author herself. She has won a Carroll Award, a Daphne du Maurier Award, and was nominated this year for a Christie Award. And these are all big guns in the Christian fiction award world. And the Christies are pretty much equivalent to the Oscars in the Christian fiction world. And so congratulations, Sara. And well deserved, because I've read several of your books, and honestly, I can't put them down when I start them. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And Sara has just launched a novel and a novella, which is a part of an anthology. And she's going to talk a little bit about those a bit later. But first, we are going to get to editing. And I love the aspect of editing in the writing process. I know some writers don't like it, but for me, I don't know, there's something about cleaning up a work and making it pristine, which I really like. So, and Sara always makes me a better writer, and I learn through each book. It's like having a grammar lesson. And so anyways, it's always a good investment for an author to hire a good editor. But as a reader, did you know that there's more than one type of editing? Because there is. And I'm going to get Sara to explain what those types of editing are, and how and what she does herself in what types of editing she does. Sara?
Sure. So I'm glad you enjoy the editing process. You're right. A lot of writers don't. It can be a little bit painful. It's true. But if you can kind of look at it as this, you're not working against your editor. The two of you are a team, and you're working, towards a common goal of making your work better. That helps. And I find that with me and my editors as well, that sometimes with the feedback, you have to kind of let it absorb a little bit, but almost always when I kind of get over myself and follow their advice, it's better. And so it is really, really important. So yeah, there are three main levels of editing. So the first one is the very big picture. It's called a developmental. Sometimes it's called a substantive or structural editing. And that's just looking at all the big pieces, like you're following the whole story arc. You're looking at character development. You're looking at the placement of different scenes. Maybe if I'm going through and I feel like something should be moved to the opening instead of third or fourth chapter, something like that. That kind of thing. If there's any big plot holes, if there's a strong beginning and ending, that kind of thing. So it's the big overall picture. The next level is copy or line editing, which is how it sounds. It's going line by line, sentence by sentence, and making sure that the sentences work and flow, that the paragraphs come together well. It's checking for big grammar issues, all that kind of thing. You're looking for cliches and that sort of thing at that point. And then typically at that point, when those two edits are done, the manuscript's formatted. And the next and final phase of editing is proofreading. And that works best if you can do it on a manuscript that looks like a book. So when I do that level, I usually do it on a PDF or on a Kindle. I prefer a Kindle. For some reason, you can see things differently that you don't see when you're reading just a Word document. So that last final proofread is done usually on the Kindle or a PDF, and you're just looking for last minute spelling mistakes, things that can happen in the earlier editing levels as you go through those. A couple of extra spaces between words or 2 periods at the end of a sentence, that kind of thing. All those last little tiny things, and that's the final stage of editing. So when I also do kind of add in a mentoring aspect to my editing. So I specialize in working with new writers. That's what I love to do. So as I'm going through, I'm not just making edits or changes. I do a lot of comments explaining why I did it. So as you say, it kind of feels like a course. I'm not sure how appealing a grammar course sounds, but it's basically what it is. And I love it if my editor does that to me, because I always want to learn more and more. And so when something new comes along, I'm like, I didn't even know that. And I get really excited about it because I'm a geek that way. But so yeah, so I try and add that in as well. So you get a real, by the time you finish that book, I really want the reader, the writer to feel it's still their book. I'm very careful not to change their voice or their story. It's their story, and they have the final say in whether they accept or reject any of those edits. But I really want them to feel like it was a great learning experience, and they're perfectly content with it and feel like the book is a lot better than it was.
And as an author, I appreciate all of that. Like the mentoring has really helped, and I feel like with each book, I am getting to be a better writer, and a lot of that has to do with the time you take with me.
Yeah, great.
So I've already we've alluded to the fact that it is important to have a good editor as a writer. Can you elaborate on that a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's important. I'd say it's critical, unless you just want to write a fun book of stories and put it out for your family and friends or something, which is fine. That's totally legitimate. But if you want to be a serious writer, if you want to be taken seriously, if you want people to actually buy your book and tell other people about it and give you good reviews, you have to have a good edit. And all of us need that. Like I do something you're not supposed to do when I write, and I edit as I write. Two different sides of the brain, and so you're not supposed to do that, but I can't turn it off. And so when I finish a book, it's pretty clean, and then I'll edit it myself. But I would never put it out in the world without having someone else edit it, because you just can't. You're too close to your own story. You have the whole thing in your head, so sometimes you don't even realize that you haven't explained something well to readers because they're not coming at it with that knowledge. And so you really need that substantive edit for sure. And you absolutely need the others as well, because it's crazy how you can read something 100 times. When I put out my first book, for example, I had read that book hundreds of times, and it had been edited by the publishing company. And when it came out, somehow at one of the crucial moments of the story, which summed up the theme of the whole book, the narrator was clinging to the truth that the light always overcomes the darkness. Light always overcomes the darkness. It's repeated like 3 times. And when I read the book for the first time after it came out, I was horrified to see that it actually said, darkness always overcomes the light. Darkness always overcomes the light. It's just because your mind switches things. You see what you expect to see, and everyone had missed that. And so that's sort of an epic editing fail that you really hope would not happen if you have other people, fresh eyes coming at that. And there's just too many books coming out there, particularly now that it's so easy to indie publish. There's like 1.5 million books that come out every year or something. If you want to stand out, that's one of the ways that you do it, other than telling a really great story. It has to be well written, because readers are very savvy and they will know if it has not been well edited. And so it's critical.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And that's a really good point, that it's a way to stand out, because there are so many books coming out. And I know from having read different books, I can pretty much spot which ones haven't had a really good edit. So
yeah, and by a qualified editor, because
yes,
a lot of people say, oh, my mom read it or my friend read it. A real test is if the person who reads it comes back and says, "This was perfect. Don't change a thing." That is not the editor that you want. You want it to be a little bit painful because then you know you're actually doing something.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. And it is painful sometimes.
It can be.
I'm curious to know how actually you got into editing. I've never heard you explain why you chose to be an editor. Like, were you good at it in high school? Like, grammar was your thing, or?
Yeah, I have always been a grammar nerd for sure. Loved English classes, always my favorite. I did a degree in English. I just loved it. I'm not sure. I don't remember really making a conscious decision to do it. I know after I had my first book come out and I started going to writers' conferences, I would just be having conversations with people, and that almost always came up. There were a lot of new writers wondering, they had no idea how to get their books edited or by whom. And so I think initially I probably just offered to take a look at them for them and maybe do, and it went well, and I found out I loved it, and I got good feedback on my editing. And so it just kind of spread. It's not something I've even ever really tried to promote. It's been a lot of word of mouth, and I've had more work than I've known what to do with. I'm actually trying to get out of it a little bit, not completely, but I'm trying to make a shift to focusing more on writing. But I would say it's kind of like getting out of the mafia because, and I get it, because when you have an editor that you work really well with, someone who doesn't change your tone, who gets you feel like they get your stories and they've helped you in the past with other books, you don't want to let them go. So it's kind of tricky to get out of, but and I do enjoy it, so I'm not going to get out of it entirely, but yeah, that's
Yes,
how
it
it's
is.
I guess.
It's scary thinking about trying to get a new editor sometimes, and yeah,
Yeah, you want a
word of,
level of comfort and you want a level of trust, right? And once you've
yeah,
built that, it's hard to let it go.
yeah, it really is. So,
Yeah.
what do you like best about editing?
Well, I think probably what I said is working with the new writers is
Yeah,
what I really enjoy, and I a lot of them I've never met. I mean, of course, it's all done online, and so I have a lot of clients that are in the States, and yet you feel as though you've developed a really strong relationship with them. I feel like they're good friends. Like you kind of do this editing journey together. You go back, there's a lot of back and forth, and working through things together. And by the end of it, I feel like I have a really good, great, sometimes really great relationship with them. So yeah, that's really the big part of it, the relationships and the mentoring part is, and just feeling like getting a lot of feedback that people really genuinely have appreciated it and feel like their work is better and they're more confident in their work now, and that's great.
yeah. And least, what do you like least?
Um, I think probably the least thing is the fact that at times it can be extremely time consuming. It can take a lot more time than writing for me. And because I do have a lot of books I need to write, that can sometimes be a little bit frustrating. But I try and rein that in because I don't want to cut anybody short on what they are getting from me. So I always try to just put that out of my head and give every manuscript my full attention. But yeah, if there was a negative, that would be it, that it can take up a lot of time.
Okay. And then finally, I want to talk about common errors. So I don't, it's always a surprise to me what pops out in each new book I do. And so I'm going to spill my own. So every book I have some kind of word I choose to use a gazillion times. And so for Weight of the Pound, I use the word but he, but this, but that. And anyway, so by the end, Sara was kind of like, okay, this has been used way too much. And so
Mhm.
um, so that's a common error for me. And it happens in every book, but it's not the same word. It's always a different word that I
Mhm.
choose to cling to. So, what other common errors do you find that you run across?
Well, that's a big one, of course. They're called weasel words, and we
Yes.
all have them. And as you say, you kind of feel like you get one under control, and then another one pops up. I think that's why they're called weasel words. It's like that game,
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
slam down one, and another one will pop up. So that's really big. The other things are a lot of cliches. Passive writing instead of active writing, so where things are happening to a character instead of characters doing things, and that's much so. For example, a door was slammed in his face versus Lizzie slammed the door in his face. Like, it's much stronger when you write in active instead of passive. Um, Point of view issues are huge. That's something I come across over and over and over. And as new writers, that's very common. You head hop, what's called head hopping. So you're kind of telling the point of view of several different characters, or more than one anyway, in a scene, and you never want to do that. You want to stay in one. And that's really important because the point of view character is what grounds the reader. That's how the reader sees and hears and tastes and smells what's happening. And you need to be in that one head so that you're grounded and you know what you're looking at. And so that's a really big one. And the very big one is deep point of view. I know you've heard me mention this a few times. So it's taking out all those buffer words like he heard the doorbell ring and just saying the doorbell rang. So you're taking readers, when you use those buffering words, I call them, you're pushing readers back a step. You're telling them after the fact that something happened. Where if you take all that out, you're bringing them right in, and whatever is happening to the character, it's now happening to the reader at the exact same time. So those are the kinds of books where readers are right there in the scene, and they, when they finish or somebody interrupts them or something, it takes them a minute to come back to reality because you've been completely lost in the story. And those are the books that people can't put down. So deep point of view is really, really important. If you're a new writer and you're not familiar with that concept, that's the element that will take your writing to the next level. Yeah, so those are really the big ones. Of course, the old standard of telling and not showing. And the big way to fix that is instead of using like adverbs, you use a lot of verbs, and you use a lot of you get rid of most of the dialogue tags and you use action beats. And the thing that I will pound into my clients is to use action beats that are scene specific.
Yes.
So I also get a lot in books of people looking at each other at every other action beat, or breathing. Those are the two big ones. And I'm like, yes, we do that in real life for sure. We look at each other, we breathe, but readers can assume that. They'll just assume that unless you say she wouldn't meet his eyes or something, they're looking at each other when they're speaking to each other. So you don't need that. And or smiled and laughed and all those things that you can do anywhere, you want to use sparingly. To bring interest in, you want to find a scene specific action beat. So like a restaurant is a really good place for those, right? So you can hear dishes clinking, and you can unfold a napkin and wipe something off the table or whatever. That kind of thing that you can only do in that scene. And that's the kind of thing that really brings those scenes to life. So that's another thing I harp on about with my clients till they're sick of hearing about it, but it's important.
Yes, I have heard that several times, and it's
Yeah.
actually harder to do than it sounds easy enough, but it's hard to do because then you start repeating some things like action beats, you start repeating. And so
that's true. And that's the danger, because you can repeat that somebody looked at somebody 100 times without people noticing, because that's just normal. But if you repeat, she snapped her gum 10 times, people are going to really notice that, right? So it's really great to use unusual and interesting action beats, but you don't want to overuse them. In fact, if it's really unusual and interesting, you don't want to use them more than once in a book, or it loses its power.
Yeah. Well, that's extremely, that's a fascinating, the whole aspect of all of that is just fascinating for me as a writer. Like, there's so much to learn. And like, I think I could write till I was 100 and I'd still only be just starting on getting good at the craft.
Yeah, and you always can just keep learning. I always want every book I put out to be better than the one before. And that means you've learned something new, right? That you're applying. So you can always keep learning.
Yeah. Excellent. So we're going to move on and just talk about our books, specifically your books right now. So I'm going to just let you tell us about your books, what genres you write, or genre you write, and series or whatever else you'd like to tell us about generally, and then about your new releases.
Okay, so I typically write romantic suspense for the Christian market. I do also write, because I consider myself, I am a hybrid author. So that means I have some books out that are traditionally published with a publisher. And I've also started moving into indie publishing. So I have eight traditionally published books and 5 indie so far. So they're in my indie, with my indie books, I put them out through a group called the Mosaic Collection, which I am honored and blessed to be a part of. It's a great group of women, all indie authors. And we just basically we put out different one of us puts out a book every month or two, and then we all just kind of rally around and support and help promote that. And what the other thing that we do is we put out an anthology twice a year, a collection of our stories. So I have I think about 8 or 9 we've put out so far. We do one in the summer and we do one at Christmas. I have a story in each of them. And those are not typically romantic suspense. I don't know why. When I write shorter pieces, they don't tend to come out as romantic suspense. I tried with the very first one. It was okay, but it didn't work great. And then I thought, maybe I don't have to write romantic suspense with my smaller pieces. So I don't. But what I do is I tie them into my indie series somehow. So they're either a prequel or a sequel, or they are the story of a minor character in one of the novels of the series. And I'm getting to the point now where I have enough stories pretty much for a couple of my series that I'm going to be putting out a collection of those stories. And while you can read each story in each book basically as a standalone, there will be a suggested order of a reading with those that will mix up the books and the stories. So that if you read them right through in the suggested order, you'll get the full Rose Tattoo trilogy experience. So that's been kind of fun because a lot of times your minor characters don't get their own story, and so this has given me a chance to do that. So we did just have one come out. Our Christmas one came out November 8th, and it's called A Thrill in the Air. That's a minor character from my book Every Star in the Sky. So that's a lot of fun. And then so I say my other books are romantic suspense. They don't always follow the typical, in fact, they pretty much never follow the typical Christian romantic suspense style. And so I think that's a little bit tricky. Readers don't always, publishers don't always know what to do with me. They're just different. I don't know why I never set out again to be different, write things that are, different than what's out there, but those are the stories that have come to me and that have come out. And if I try to write differently, it doesn't usually go very well. So I just have to tell the stories as they come to me. So this latest one that came out November 22nd is called The Color of Sky and Stone. I have it here. And it's quite different. The biggest difference from a traditional romantic suspense is that the hero and heroine do not meet in person until about 2/3 of the way through the book. Typically, they meet right at the beginning, if not the first chapter, the first couple chapters. Their lives intersect. One of them writes a letter that falls into the other's hand by mistake, and he knows he shouldn't, but he does respond to it, and that he thinks he'll just sort of tell her that her letter meant a lot to him and thank you, and that'll be the end of it. But instead, it ignites this correspondence between them that changes both of their lives. And when they do find out 3/4 of the way through the book who the other person is, they realize it's really too dangerous for them to be together. And so it's a book that's got a bit of an epistolary book, which is highly unusual for romantic suspense. That was a lot of fun to write those letters. They're not all letters. The whole book isn't written in letters. It's not a true epistolary, but a lot of letters. So that was a lot of fun. It just allowed me to try that. And a lot of the reviewers have commented on the fact that they really like that, because when they didn't know each other and weren't talking face to face, they could be really, really open with each other. And for various reasons, both of them have been very, very isolated. She's surrounded by people, but she's very alone. And he has, because of a childhood trauma, made a career out of staying out of people's sight and living in the shadows, which is why the series is called In the Shadows. And so this is the first time they've ever really been able to open up completely to another person. And so their relationship's able to develop sort of quickly and very, very deeply through these letters. So that was a lot of fun. So that is The Color of Sky and Stone, my 2 latest releases. And it's the first book in the series In the Shadows.
And so I've had the privilege of hearing a little bit of The Color of Sky and Stone, and it is really good. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. So you want to check that one out. So right now we're going to talk a little bit about both of our books. And so we're just gonna kind of interview each other. And so of course, obviously we've exchanged the questions ahead of time. And so I'm just gonna start. So I do find the genre of romantic suspense, I would find that very challenging to write. To me, that seems very hard. Is there a particular reason you got into that genre?
Yeah, funny. I don't think I ever made a conscious decision to write romantic suspense. And when I started writing, seriously, that is what came out. And probably because it's what I love to read. I think I would find it very difficult to have. I call myself a lazy writer. I don't love to do a lot of research. I do the research I need to do to write the books, to make my books authentic and factual. But I don't think I could do like a historical novel that required a lot of research. So maybe that was part of it. But I just have always loved romantic suspense, and I love that combination. I love the suspense when you're like heart's pounding and you're on the edge of your seat and you can't wait. Yet it's kind of like looking at an accident where you can't look, but you can't look away. And I call my brand, my tagline is on the edge suspense, because I just love that, being on the edge. But I also am a sucker for a good love story, and I always have been. I love a good love story. I love the classic Casablanca and Gone with the Wind, and Fair to Remember, those kinds of things I just love. So that combination is really powerful, because if you take two people that are in danger and they have strong feelings for each other, or they love each other, that just ups the ante for both of them, right? So I write both because I like them, but I put them together kind of as a tool to just really increase the intensity of the story, but it also lets you have kind of more complex storylines and backstories and that kind of thing as well. But I always kind of describe it as if you love sports, you can sit and watch a hockey game or baseball game. It doesn't matter who's playing, and you can enjoy it. But if it's your team that's playing, and it's your team that you have lived and died for your whole life, and they've never won the World Series or the Stanley Cup, and they're in the game, that's a whole new level. And that's what romantic suspense is. It's adding that whole other level. So that's why I write it and why I love to read it.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
what about you? What made you get into fantasy retellings?
I
Fairy tale retelling, sorry.
No, that's okay. Because it's kind of a fantasy fairy tale. I love the genre. I like the world building, and again, I am too a lazy. We don't like doing a lot of research.
Is there to make stuff
So
up?
yeah, you
Yep.
make it up, right?
Mhm,
So it's a made up
mhm.
world. It's based on some things. Like I did research wolves and kind of their mentality and whatnot for that this series, but I like that, and I love the structure of a fairy tale, and then twisting that and kind of, what can I do to change this? What twist can I put in? And just starting to ask questions of what if, like, what if the wolf fell in love with Little Red Riding Hood? What if the wolf was a human? And what if he wasn't the bad guy, sort of thing? So that's kind of why I wanted to dabble into fantasy.
And I've read both of these books and I love them. And I love Teo, who would have been the bad guy in the fairy tale, maybe. But yeah, you did a wonderful job with those. So
Oh,
those are
thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
So you said that, and I believe I read a blog that you had written that the color of stone and sky was especially special to you. And why was that?
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to answer. I think after you've written a few books, most authors will say that there's one that just feels like the story of their heart. And I don't know if you can always explain why. It just seems to be a story that you connect with on a little deeper level. I do connect really deeply with all my stories and with all my characters. But this one just seemed a little more. I think maybe because the main character Tane is just so broken at the beginning. Now my characters, and particularly my male characters, do tend to be broken, but he really is, and yet his instinct is to protect others always, even risk to himself. And so I just can't help but sort of fall in love with a guy like that. And I don't know, their story is so beautiful. It's just one reviewer just said it's the story of two lonely hearts that in a very unusual way find each other and realize that they're not alone. And maybe that's what it is, because my theme of my all my books, of my writing brand, my writing career, is that we're never alone, that God is always with us, whatever we're going through. And that theme is probably more prevalent in this book than in almost any other. They start out both feeling like they're really kind of lost in darkness. In this first letter that Leah sends to Tane, she mentions that maybe they can just write letters back and forth a bit, and it doesn't have to be more than that. It can just be her turning on a light in her home, and him turning on a light like in his window, so that when they're out wandering alone in the dark, they can see that light and know that they're not alone. And it was sort of meant on an emotional level for them, but it also translates into their spiritual journeys, particularly Tane's, who had lost his faith due to that childhood trauma and finds his way back to that light after wandering in darkness for so long. So maybe that's what it is. It's just the sort of the book that does fully capture that theme of my writing, and that theme that I feel is just so powerful and something that we need to know so much. And with the world these days, it feels like there's so much darkness. And so reading about that journey to light, even in the midst of all the darkness, that we can keep our eyes on that light and know that we're not alone, is so powerful. And I think maybe that's what resonated so deeply with me.
Yeah.
What about you? Why is Way to the Crown so special to you?
Again, it's Tio. I really, the character took over into the forest. It was Ryder's story, and Ryder's the Little Red Riding Hood character, obviously, and Tio is the wolf character, although he's human. And he started to take over into the forest, and I just really liked this guy. And I wasn't sure, like, was he an anti-hero or was he going to be all bad? Like, he was the love interest, but I wasn't really sure how he was going to go. And then as I wrote, I just started to really like him, and I just was like, this guy is super fascinating. And I do always love the trope of kind of bad boy turning good. And so then for Way to the Crown, it's his story and his journey from one place in his life to another place. And, he has a lot of questions about his past and his father and what kind of man he'll be. And I just enjoyed writing that growth journey for him. And that was what I just loved about Way to the Crown. And Tio, I think, will always be a little bit special to me.
Yeah, I love Tio too. He's a great character.
Sorry, I just dropped my sheet, so I gotta pick it up. Okay, so why let me see, sorry, I'm just kind of so I think now we're going to read some excerpts from our books. So I'm going to get you to go first, Sara.
All right. So this is from Color of Sky and Stone. This is the second chapter in the book. Tane is the main character, and he's in part of a very, well, I'll explain this a little bit, but he's an undercover cop, kind of a cop spy combination. He and his partner Johnny are on their bellies in an alley observing the warehouse of arms dealer. And that's where I'm going to begin here. Tane ducked a little, keeping his line of vision just above the barrier. What had Johnny seen? The eerie green darkness took on multiple forms through the lenses of the goggles, way more than there were supposed to be. The figures gradually separated, advancing like spawn of the creature from the Black Lagoon, at least 6 of them, and they appeared to be headed in the direction of the alley. Had the bad guy somehow figured out Tane and his partner were watching them? How could they have? He and Johnny worked for a covert organization called DAG and were part of an ops division that was blacker than black, completely classified. The arms dealer they'd been targeting was high up on DAG's list of most wanted and top of the most dangerous list. The operation was taken seriously by those who ran the organization, the heads, as Johnny and Tane called them, and tightly managed, a bit too tightly for Tane's taste, although maybe management hadn't been as tight as he thought. He and Johnny had been investigating Dario Solano for months, They pinpointed the location of his operation a few weeks ago and spent every minute of the intervening time recording the minutest detail they could find about the place, including digging up an old floor plan in the city archives and using the information to map out a strategy for bringing in a larger team to swarm the place. Tonight was meant to be his and Johnny's last night of reconnaissance before D-Day tomorrow. Someone shouted in Italian and waved an arm in their direction. Taine's first language was French, the official language of Tahiti, where his parents were from, but he didn't speak Italian. Never had he wished he could as fervently as he did in this moment. The shadows advanced. When they were about 150 yards away, Johnny muttered a crude word and tucked the binoculars into his jacket before grabbing the cross and shoving it inside the neck of his t-shirt. He waved 4 fingers through the air, their signal for, "We need to get out of here now." Then, still on his belly, he pushed himself backwards. He didn't have to convince Taine. The problem with confronting a gang of weapons dealers was that those suckers were armed to the teeth, far more heavily than he and his partner were. Doubtless, whoever was bearing down on them had night vision equipment vastly superior to theirs. He and Johnny would be on full display if the shadow creatures got any closer and if they knew where to look, which it was becoming increasingly apparent they did. Taine retreated a few feet into the alley, pushing with his feet and elbows. It would be a lot faster to stand and run, but if they hadn't actually been made, all that would do was paint a huge bullseye on both their backs. A crumpled takeout bag near Taine's head disappeared as though swept away by an invisible hand, followed by a crack, muffled by a silencer, but still thunderous in the 3 a.m. silence in the industrial area of Vancouver, British Columbia. They were under attack with no backup, which made this a very, very bad situation. Fire streaked along his arm before a series of cracks, like the finale of a fireworks display, shattered the momentary stillness. A shower of dirt, and Taine didn't want to know what else, pelted his face and neck. Running suddenly seemed the best of all possible options. Rising to his knees, Taine hissed, "Let's go." Johnny didn't respond. Taine's heart sank. His partner lay face down on the cement, not moving. Taine grabbed Johnny's arm and whispered his partner's code name as loudly as he dared. "Ice." Nothing.
Ooh, that's a good place to stop that. That was extreme. Like, that's your first chapter?
That's the second chapter, yeah.
Second chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I really can't wait to read that. So I am going to read just a short excerpt from Weight of the Crown. This is from chapter 1, and it's not really a spoiler, but Teo is now king. You learn that right away. And so they are having open court, where the wolves and the foresters especially can come and air their complaints, because Teo has started to make some changes and things aren't going all that well. So he is in the middle of a court, and open court, and he doesn't really want to be there listening to people complain. So an elderly woman with a slight limp moved in front of the king. Her long hair was pulled severely back in a bun, the streaks of gray making a striped pattern across her head. She was tall and lean, but the washed-out blue eyes boring into him raised the hairs on the back of Teo's neck. He forced himself to meet her stare. "Don't show fear." Where had that thought come from? He wasn't afraid of an old lady. "How may I help you, madame?" "My name is Marta Jurgis. I'm a forester." Her chin raised a little at the admission. The foresters weren't the wallflowers he'd always believed. The woman held out a package, which a wolf pack guard relieved her of. "I came to give you this. I found it in the forest, but it's not native to it." The guard checked the package, but, deeming it safe, passed it to Alaric, who peeked into the opening. He frowned. Teo leaned closer, peering into the box. Blue leaves. What were they? The woman held up her hand. "Don't touch them. I was sweeping under some bushes near my home when I noticed blue beneath a pile of twigs. I grabbed it, thinking it was fabric. I don't know where the plant came from. The best I can figure is it blew into my yard in that windstorm last week. It doesn't seem natural. My hands tingled when I picked it up. Maybe I'm allergic, but you need to be careful." She locked eyes with Teo. Again, the hairs on his neck rose. His gut told him she was talking about more than the foreign plant. "Why bring it to me?" "You're the new king. You said you want things to be different. So do I. I brought it to you because I think it has trouble for the foresters written all over it. You said you would be a king that represented everyone in Wolf Kingdom. So I'm trusting you'll protect us from whatever might pose a threat. A challenge to see if he'd do as he said he would. He leveled his gaze to hers. Thank you, Ms. Durgis, for bringing this to my attention. We'll look into it. It's trouble. She nodded her head once, as if agreeing with herself, then strode from the room, not waiting for an escort. Tio side-eyed his uncle, who had rewrapped the package tightly. That's all for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Tio stood, gesturing for his uncle to come near. That was strange. I agree. Tio's eyes narrowed. Don't touch it with your bare hands. It sounds as though it's toxic. She was challenging me to step up and put my words into action. Indeed, Alaric clapped Tio's shoulder. She has nothing to worry about. I believe you will be a king who does represent everyone in Wolf Kingdom. Tio blew out a breath. I hope I don't disappoint her. You won't. Alaric lifted the package. I'll deal with this. Let me know what you find out. His uncle nodded before heading out the door, leaving Tio alone in the large room. He rolled his shoulders, then tilted his head, the sunbeams warming his skin and washing away the doubts and worries of the day. Playing hooky had been a fantasy today. He sighed, picturing walking the streets of the city, people watching. That would be the best way for him to take the temperature of the kingdom, and maybe see a certain courier. He smiled as an image of Ryder shoved aside the memory of the strange plant and the name Han for a brief moment. But the stack of files on his desk was a reality check, reminding Tio that he wasn't free to do as he wished. After all, he had a kingdom to run.
I love that book. I highly recommend both those books to everybody. And I love the covers. The cover to book one, Into the Forest, just won the Word Award in Canada for best cover, and definitely deserving of that. It's beautiful.
Yes, Jenith Dick was the graphic designer, and she did an amazing job. She's very talented, so I was quite happy for her to get some recognition. So
cover is so important too.
Yes, those are the two big things: editing and cover design. You want to invest in them, and that's what it is, an investment.
Absolutely. We really do judge books by their covers, and it can make or break a book. So
yes,
put some money into it.
That's right. So where can we get your book, Sara?
Amazon's the easiest place. A lot of my books are in Barnes and Noble. Not this latest one yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah, very few brick and mortar stores at this point, so Amazon's easiest.
And work in progress?
Well, I've got a few. The problem with being an indie author is you can kind of put out books as you feel led to put them out. And so I actually have at the moment 3 open series that aren't finished yet. So I'm hoping in 2024 to finish at least 2 of those series. And I also am republishing my very first series, which was called the 7 Trilogy at the time. Excuse me. So they're going to be coming out with Mountain Brook Inc., my publisher, 2 of them in 2024 and 1 in 2025. So I'm just going through those right now and updating them and adding in a few new chapters and making them hopefully a little better with all the things that I've learned over the years. So they've got quite a bit on my plate in the next couple of years. Yeah. How about you? What are you working on right now?
I too have several different manuscripts open. I'm switching genres again. I think I get bored. So I have kind of rom-coms, adult rom-coms, in the Christian fiction. So I've got 2 books that are done and need editing, but need a few beta readers first. And then when I started in NaNoWriMo last month, which will be part of the series. So I've got a few things on my plate as well. And but it's all fun. So it's
good. You know, that's the main thing. If you're having fun doing it, I guess if it ever stops being really fun, maybe I will stop doing it, but yeah. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it remains fun, this isn't work to me. So
yeah, no, me neither.
Yeah. So that's going to conclude our interview for today. Thank you so much, Sara, for joining me today and enlightening our viewers on what editing is all about. I think it's important that readers kind of understand what is involved in the process, and I know a lot of them are interested. So I thank you for taking time today and being here. And I wish you all the success as you promote these 2 new books and really, if you like romantic suspense, and even if you don't, I suggest you check out Sarah's books, because the one great thing is that they are different. And I like reading books that are a different style and have some different things in it. So, and Sarah does it so well. So,
Thank you.
congratulations and all the success.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to your new release.
Thank you. And so thank you, friends, for joining in today. I know it's a busy season, so I really appreciate you taking the time and taking a peek here today. And I wish you happy holidays and Merry Christmas.